I saw her standing by the chapel entrance, and my entire world stopped. Just one glance, one single moment of her presence beside my bride, and everything I thought I knew shattered into pieces. The wedding had been perfect until that second. My hands were shaking as I stood at the altar, and not because of nerves. It was because of what I suddenly understood, what that one look from Ashley told me without a single word being spoken. But let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story didn't start at the wedding. It started 3 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon when I walked into my office at Henderson & Associates and found Jennifer waiting by my desk with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that made everything else fade away. My name is Michael Richardson. I'm 38 years old, and until 6 months ago, I had what I thought was the perfect life. I lived in a restored Victorian home in the Riverside district of Portland, the kind of place with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and a backyard that looked like something out of an architecture magazine. The mortgage was steep, but I made good money as a real estate attorney, pulling in about $185,000 a year. My credit score was solid at 742. My 401k was growing, and I had no debt except the house. Jennifer was different from anyone I'd ever dated. She was a graphic designer, creative and spontaneous, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, and this infectious laugh that made strangers turn around in coffee shops. We met at a bar in downtown Portland where mutual friends introduced us. I remember thinking she was out of my league, too beautiful, too smart, too alive. But she was interested in me, and I was absolutely amazed by that fact. We moved in together after 8 months of dating. She brought color into my carefully curated life. Suddenly, the house wasn't just a real estate investment anymore. It became a home. She painted the guest bedroom this gorgeous seafoam color, put plants everywhere, hung her photography on the walls. She organized wine tastings in our living room. She filled the place with laughter and music and life. I proposed on the Saturday morning in October, right there in our backyard among the roses. It was simple and perfect. I got down on one knee with my grandmother's diamond ring, a 2-carat oval cut set in platinum, and asked her to marry me. She said yes before I could even finish the sentence, and I remember the feeling of absolute certainty that I had made the right decision. Everything about that proposal felt right. Jennifer cried happy tears. We called our parents immediately. My mother, Linda, was thrilled. Jennifer's mother, Karen, seemed a bit surprised, but warm enough about it. We set the wedding for the following June. It gave us 8 months to plan, which Jennifer dove into with the kind of enthusiasm that made me fall for her all over again. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, June 15th, at the Riverside Chapel, a beautiful restored church from the 1890s with stained glass windows and a view of the Willamette River. The reception would be at the Hawthorne Estate, a historic mansion converted into an event venue. We'd invited 200 guests. Jennifer's dress cost $4,200 and came all the way from a designer in New York. My tuxedo was custom tailored from a shop on Park Avenue. Everything was expensive, beautiful, and carefully planned down to the last detail. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy but genuinely happy. Jennifer worked with the florist to create these stunning cascading bouquets with white roses and eucalyptus. We did cake tastings. We practiced our vows. We had our rehearsal dinner the night before, where everything went smoothly. My groomsmen, my brother David, my college roommate Brandon, and my friend Marcus were in good spirits. Jennifer's bridesmaids seemed happy. Even the families seemed to be getting along. But there was one thing that had been nagging at me for about 2 weeks. Nothing major, just an odd feeling. Jennifer had become slightly distant. Not in an obvious way. She still said she loved me, we still had sex, she was still enthusiastic about the wedding. But there were moments where I'd catch her staring out the window with this expression I couldn't quite read. And she'd been spending an unusual amount of time on her phone, typing messages with a focus that seemed intense. I told myself I was being paranoid. Cold feet before a wedding is normal. I was probably projecting my own anxiety onto her. So I didn't bring it up. I didn't ask questions. I just pushed through the final week, getting my house in order, finishing up work projects, trying to mentally prepare for the biggest day of my life. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my alarm. My heart was pounding. I lay in bed in my apartment. I'd stayed at Brandon's place the night before, following tradition, and I thought about Jennifer in her dress, getting ready across town. I thought about standing at that altar and saying vows in front of 200 people. Everything was going to change today. Everything was going to be perfect. I had no idea that in approximately 6 hours, I would see something that would make me question every single moment of the last 3 years. Act 5. The Bottom. The chapel doors opened at 2:47 p.m., and that's when I saw her. Ashley stood in the entrance, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she had this expression on her face. Not sadness, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. She looked directly at Jennifer, who stood beside me in her $4,000 wedding dress, and in that single moment, everything froze. I watched Jennifer's face drain of color. Her hand, which had been gripping my arm, went completely limp. The bouquet, those stunning white roses and eucalyptus that we'd spent hours selecting, trembled slightly in her grip. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. Just those 2 words, just a breath. The organist kept playing. The guests didn't notice yet, but I did. And something in that moment told me that my entire life had just changed in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. I didn't ask who Ashley was. Some part of me already knew, or maybe I didn't want to know. So I did what I'd been trained to do as a lawyer. I compartmentalized. I filed the question away in a mental drawer labeled "Later," locked it, and threw away the key. The ceremony proceeded. We walked down the aisle. I said my vows. Jennifer said hers, and her voice only cracked once. But her eyes kept drifting to the back of the chapel, where Ashley sat in the 3rd pew, watching us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. At the reception, things fell apart. We made it through the cocktail hour. The photographer took pictures. My mother, Linda, gave a toast about how she'd never seen me happier, and I wanted to laugh because the word happy had become meaningless. Then Jennifer's mother, Karen, stood up. She looked directly at Jennifer, and I saw her mouth tighten. "I hope you know what you're doing," Karen said, raising her glass. "To my daughter, may she find the happiness she deserves." The words were congratulatory on the surface, but the subtext was screaming something else entirely. After dinner, I finally grabbed Jennifer alone in the hallway outside the main ballroom. The music from the reception was distant, muffled by the thick doors of the Hawthorne estate. "Who is Ashley?" I asked. Jennifer's face went white. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, and I watched her calculate something in her head, whether to lie, whether to tell the truth, what the consequences would be either way. She's a friend," Jennifer said finally. "That's not an answer. Michael, please, not now, not here. Let's just finish the reception and we can talk about this." "Talk about what?" My voice was rising. I could feel it happening, that moment where control slips away. "Who is she?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer me. Instead, she turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving me standing alone in that hallway with the certainty that my marriage had ended before it had even begun. The rest of the reception is a blur. I drank too much. I danced with people whose names I couldn't remember. At some point, Brandon pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. At another point, my brother David noticed that Jennifer was spending an awful lot of time talking to her friend from the back pew, and he gave me this look, a look that suggested he knew something I didn't. We left the reception early. Jennifer claimed she was tired. I didn't argue. We drove to the airport in silence, heading to Maui for a honeymoon neither of us wanted anymore. The hotel in Hawaii was beautiful. Oceanfront, private beach, the kind of place that cost $2,800 a night. We had a suite with a view of the sunset. On our wedding night, Jennifer fell asleep on the couch in the living room, still wearing her reception dress. I sat on the balcony and made a decision. I was going to ask her directly. I was going to demand answers, and I was going to find out who Ashley was and what she meant to my wife. But first, I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I woke up early. Jennifer was still asleep. I took my phone out onto the balcony and opened Instagram. I typed Ashley into the search bar, not even knowing her last name. Hundreds of results came up. I scrolled through them, looking for someone who matched the woman in the chapel. And then I found her. Ashley Chen, 32 years old, graphic designer based in Portland. Her profile was public, and her most recent post was from 3 days ago. A photo of her with Jennifer at a restaurant, the two of them laughing, heads bent together like they were sharing a secret. The caption read, "Best friends for life. No matter what happens, I've got your back, babe." I clicked on her profile and started scrolling through her photos. Most of them were professional work, logos, branding, design mock-ups. But scattered throughout were personal photos. Photos of her with Jennifer. Photos of them on a hiking trip. Photos of them at a concert. Photos that went back almost 2 years. Then I found a photo from 6 months ago. Jennifer and Ashley sitting together on a couch, clearly the same couch that was now in our living room at home. Ashley's arm was around Jennifer, and Jennifer was looking at her the way she looked at me on our wedding day. I didn't need to see any more. I already knew. The realization hit me like a physical thing. My hands started shaking. My chest felt tight. I had to sit down on the edge of the balcony chair because my legs wouldn't support me anymore. My wife wasn't in love with me. My wife was in love with her best friend. All of it, the wedding, the vows, the promises, all of it had been a lie. Or not a lie exactly, but a performance. She'd gone through with it because she'd made a commitment, or because she was scared, or because she wanted to try to make it work with a man when what she actually wanted was a woman. I thought about the moments in the weeks leading up to the wedding when she'd seemed distant. I thought about the way she'd been on her phone constantly. I thought about that look on Ashley's face in the chapel. That wasn't the look of someone who was happy for the bride. That was the look of someone who was watching the woman she loved marry someone else. I went back inside. Jennifer was awake now, sitting up on the couch, looking at me with fear in her eyes. "You know," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "I know." She started crying then, not the gentle, beautiful tears of a bride, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone who'd been caught in a massive deception. And the worst part, the thing that made me angrier than I'd ever been in my life, was that I actually felt bad for her. "I'm sorry," she said. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I love you, I do, but I'm not in love with me," I finished. She nodded, unable to speak through her tears. I walked out onto the balcony and closed the door behind me. I stood there looking out at the Pacific Ocean, at the waves crashing against the sand, and I felt something inside me die. Not dramatically, not with anger or passion, but quietly, like a light being switched off. My marriage was over. It had never really begun. And the worst part? I still had to figure out how to untangle my entire life from hers. The house, the finances, the friends who would have to choose sides. The legal nightmare of a divorce that would probably end up costing me $50,000 in attorney fees. I pulled out my phone and called my divorce attorney, Robert Matthews, even though it was early on a Sunday morning. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Michael, is everything okay?" "I need a divorce," I said, "and I need to start the paperwork tomorrow." There was a pause. Then, "I'll meet you Monday morning, my office, 9 a.m. I hung up the phone and sat there on that balcony in paradise, realizing that I'd just made the biggest purchase of my life, a house I'd never wanted to live in alone, in a city where my marriage had just imploded, with a wife who'd never loved me the way I'd loved her. The honeymoon lasted 2 more days before we flew back to Portland. Jennifer tried to talk to me multiple times, but I couldn't do it. Every time she opened her mouth, I saw Ashley's face in the chapel. I saw the photos on Instagram. I saw the lie that had been living in my home. When we got back to the Victorian house in Riverside, I moved into the guest bedroom. Jennifer didn't protest. On Tuesday morning, I went to Robert Matthews' office with a folder full of financial documents and told him everything. "This is going to be expensive," Robert said, looking over the papers. "Joint property acquired during the marriage. You're going to have to split the house equity. And if she contests the divorce, it could take months." "She won't contest it," I said. And I was right. Jennifer knew she was in the wrong. She knew that if this went to court, a judge would see through her deception in a heartbeat. Still, the process was brutal. The house had to be appraised. It came in at $1.2 million. We owed $685,000 on the mortgage, which meant there was $515,000 in equity. She wanted half of that. She also wanted half of my 401k, which had grown to about $240,000. She wanted spousal support, temporary, she said, just until she could get back on her feet. I looked at Robert across his desk and asked the question that had been eating at me since Maui. "Can I do anything to fight this?" He shook his head. "Not really. You were married for less than a week, but you acquired the house together during your relationship. Washington is a community property state. She's entitled to half of what you accumulated as a couple. The 401k, the house equity, probably some spousal support for a year or 2. So she destroys my life and I have to pay her for the privilege? Welcome to divorce law," Robert said flatly. Over the next 3 months, everything fell apart. Jennifer moved out and in with Ashley, which confirmed everything I'd suspected. My friends divided into 2 camps, those who thought Jennifer was a selfish monster, and those who thought I should have been more understanding of her journey of self-discovery. My mother, Linda, called me every day to check if I was eating enough. My father called once to ask what happened, and when I tried to explain, he just said, "Women, right?" and hung up. I had to put the house on the market. It sold within 2 weeks for $1.18 million, barely under asking. The realtor took her commission. I paid off the mortgage. I gave Jennifer her half. I paid Robert's legal fees. By the time the dust settled, I'd lost approximately $400,000, and I still had to pay her $1,500 a month in spousal support for the next 2 years. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that I'd been so focused on building a perfect life, the perfect house, the perfect career, the perfect credit score, that I'd never stopped to ask whether the person I was building it with actually wanted to be there. I moved into a studio apartment in downtown Portland. The rent was $1,200 a month. I ate a lot of takeout. I didn't call anyone back for months. I just existed in this gray space where nothing mattered anymore. That's where I was when my phone buzzed one Tuesday evening in September, 3 months after the wedding. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Michael. This is Ashley. I think we need to talk. There's something about Jennifer you need to know. Something that changes everything. Can we meet for coffee?" My first instinct was to delete the message. My second instinct was to block the number. But my third instinct, the one that won out, was curiosity. And curiosity, I was about to learn, could be far more dangerous than ignorance. I met Ashley at a Starbucks on Morrison Street on a gray Tuesday morning in September. She was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee in front of her. "One was for me," she said. Black, no sugar, the way she'd seen me drink it at the wedding. The fact that she'd paid attention to that detail made me uncomfortable. "Thank you for coming," Ashley said as I sat down across from her. She looked different in daylight, older, more tired. The sleek blonde ponytail was gone. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "I almost didn't," I said. "I almost blocked your number." "I know. I'm glad you didn't." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was cold, even though the cafe was warm. "I need to tell you something about Jennifer. Something that's going to change how you see all of this." I didn't say anything. I just waited. Ashley took a deep breath. "Jennifer didn't marry you because she's a lesbian. She married you because her parents forced her to." The words didn't make sense. I must have looked confused because Ashley continued quickly. "Her mother, Karen, did you ever wonder why she seemed so cold at the wedding? Why she gave that weird toast?" Ashley leaned forward. "Karen found out about me and Jennifer about 6 months before the wedding. She found text messages between us. She told Jennifer that if she didn't marry you, if she didn't at least try to live a normal life, she would cut her off completely. No money for rent, no support, nothing. Jennifer's job as a graphic designer doesn't pay enough to support herself in Portland without help." I felt something twist in my chest. Jennifer never mentioned any of this. Of course she didn't. She was ashamed. She thought if she married you, if she really tried, maybe she could change. Maybe she could make herself want to be with a man the way she's supposed to want to be. Ashley's voice broke slightly. I begged her not to do it. I told her it wasn't worth it, that we could figure something out. But she said the wedding was already planned, the money was already spent, and maybe this was what she needed to do. Maybe it was her responsibility. "That's insane," I said. "I know. So she married me because her mother threatened to abandon her financially?" "Yes. And because she loves her mother, despite everything. And because she's terrified of disappointing people. And because she genuinely thought maybe, just maybe, she could make it work with you, even though she knew deep down that she couldn't." I sat back in my chair. Everything clicked into place. The distance in the weeks before the wedding, the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes during the vows, the fact that she'd seemed relieved when I found out about Ashley, like a weight had been lifted. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know that this wasn't about you. You're not a bad person. You didn't do anything wrong. Jennifer loved you, loves you, just not the way a wife should love a husband. And because I'm tired of watching you think you're the victim in this story, when the real victim is Jennifer, being slowly erased by a mother who can't accept who she is." I absorbed that. Part of me wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to say that Jennifer was still a liar, that she still married me under false pretenses, that my anger was justified. But another part of me, a larger part, understood what Ashley was saying. "What does Jennifer want?" I asked. "She wants to be happy. She wants her mother to accept her. She wants you to understand that she wasn't trying to hurt you. And she wants to be able to live her life without feeling like she's betraying everyone." I picked up my coffee cup, but I didn't drink. I just held it, letting the warmth seep into my hands. "I've spent the last 3 months being angry at her," I said quietly. "I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers. I've told everyone we know that she lied to me, that she deceived me. I've made sure that everyone takes my side. I know. How do I take that back?" Ashley didn't answer for a moment. Then she said, "You start by talking to her, really talking to her. Not about the divorce, not about the settlement, but about what happened, about why she did it. And then you decide whether you can forgive her." I left the coffee shop without finishing my drink. I drove straight to Jennifer's apartment, the one she was sharing with Ashley, though I didn't let myself think too hard about that. I stood in the hallway outside her door for 5 minutes before I knocked. Jennifer answered after the third knock. She was in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, and her face went pale when she saw me. "Michael," she said. Can I come in?" I asked. She stepped aside without a word. The apartment was small and filled with light. There were plants everywhere, just like the house had been. Jennifer's photography hung on the walls. There was a painting I recognized as one of Ashley's designs. It looked like a home. It looked like a place where people actually wanted to be. We sat on the couch, the same couch that had been in our house, I realized. Jennifer had bought it. It was hers. Ashley told me about your mother, I said. Jennifer's face crumpled. Tears started streaming down her cheeks immediately. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to... She couldn't finish the sentence. She just sat there, crying. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Why didn't you say, I'm struggling with my sexuality and I need some time to figure things out before we get married? Because I was a coward, Jennifer said. Because I thought if I could just push through it, if I could just be the person everyone expected me to be, then eventually I would want to be that person. And I didn't want to disappoint you. You were so excited about the wedding. Everyone was so excited, and I couldn't stand the thought of being the person who ruined all of that. So instead you ruined it anyway, I said. Just differently. I know. We sat in silence for a while. I thought about the 3 years we'd spent together. I thought about the moments that had felt real and the moments that had clearly been performance. I thought about how much I'd loved her and how little she'd been able to love me back. I'm sorry I made this divorce so difficult, Jennifer said eventually. I'm sorry I fought you on the settlement. I was just scared. I thought if I got half the house equity, I could finally be independent. I could finally make my own choices without my mother's money controlling me. Did you? Did I what? Become independent? Jennifer looked around at the small apartment, at the plants and the paintings and the evidence of a life being built from scratch. I think I'm trying, she said. It's not easy. My mother still doesn't accept Ashley. She barely speaks to me. But at least now I'm living my life, not someone else's version of it. I nodded. I understood that in a way. I'd spent the last 3 months living in anger and blame, but I realized now that I'd also been living in a version of my life that wasn't entirely mine. I'd been so focused on the perfect house, the perfect career, the perfect credit score, that I'd never stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. I need to talk to my lawyer, I said. I think we can probably redo the settlement, maybe something more fair. Maybe something that doesn't require you to pay me back for making a mistake you made because your mother forced you to. Jennifer started crying again. You don't have to do that. I know I don't, but I'm going to anyway. I called Robert Matthews the next morning and asked him to draw up a revised settlement agreement. Jennifer would keep the house equity she'd already received. In exchange, she would keep the spousal support payments to a minimum, just 6 months instead of 2 years. It was fair. It was more than fair. But it felt right. The divorce was finalized in November. Jennifer and I had lunch one last time before the papers were officially signed. We didn't talk about the past or the future. We just talked about normal things, books we'd read, movies we'd seen, the changing weather in Portland. It was oddly peaceful. Will you be okay? Jennifer asked as we were leaving the restaurant. Yeah, I said. I think so. Eventually. I really did love you, you know. Not the way you needed me to. I know. I moved to Seattle after that. I got a job at a larger firm with a better salary. I found an apartment in Capitol Hill with exposed brick and big windows. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Marcus, who helped me untangle what had happened and what it meant about me, about my choices, about the way I'd constructed my life. A year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Karen, Jennifer's mother, at a grocery store in Portland. I was back visiting some friends. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. Michael, she said. It wasn't a question. She recognized me. Karen, I said. I didn't smile. I owe you an apology, she said, for everything, for what Jennifer put you through, for not raising her better. I looked at this woman who had driven her daughter into a marriage with me out of fear and shame and the weight of her own expectations. And I realized I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Jennifer didn't put me through anything, I said. She was put through something by you, and I helped without meaning to. So if anyone owes anyone an apology, it's all of us, to each other, and to ourselves. Karen's face went white. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there in the produce section of the grocery store, surrounded by apples and oranges, and I walked away. The last thing I heard about Jennifer was through a mutual friend who mentioned that she and Ashley were thinking about getting married, that they were talking about moving to California, where they could build a life without the weight of Portland's judgment hanging over them. I was happy for her, genuinely happy, because she was finally living the life she actually wanted, not the life someone else had scripted for her. As for me, I'm still figuring out what I want. I'm 39 years old, single, living in a city where nobody knows my story. I date occasionally. I'm not sure I want to get married again. What I do know is that I'm building a life based on what I actually want, not on what I think I'm supposed to want. And that, I've learned, is the most important kind of freedom there is.